Welcome back to Saruwatari Xtreme. Today we will be trying to start the 7, but before we get into that, a couple of questions have come in that I want to address real quick. So, for my friends in Seattle, Hutch Racers, your question was a little bit difficult to answer in the comments, and I tried to do that, but since I want to expand on that, I will answer it right here for you. And that question was, why did I decide to start working on the 7 and the NSX again, or the X? And the answer is quite simple. I do it for you guys. Really, I have no desire to work on these cars at all. And in the beginning, I was having a real hard time logically figuring out why anybody would want to see me work on these. However, some people were nice enough to kind of explain to me that their lives weren't going so great, and that for some reason, working on these cars and seeing these cars brought them back to a better time. And seeing that my life seems to be going fairly well, I felt the least I could do is try and help them get to a better place. So here we are, working on these cars, and I will just be in endless misery. So that is that question. The other question you had as far as records and times for the X and the RX-7, I have no idea. And hopefully maybe some of you know. I don't really concern myself with that type of stuff because as far as I'm concerned, it's all in the past. And all I look forward to is the future. So that's the answer to that. Now, the most important question that came through, my friend Ara, a legend in import drag racing. You all know the Purple Street Glow Solara. He is nice enough to always join in the channel, and if you watch carefully, a lot of times he'll comment. Very, very smart individual and a great friend. So he asked me personally to answer a question on this video. It actually is in regards to the X, but since we're working on the 7, my friend, we talk about it here. And Drew was actually going to be here, but she has to go to work, so I will answer the question for you. And your question was, if there was a pass made back-to-back in the X, Drew made one pass and I made one pass, who would be faster? I can tell you without hesitation, she would be faster. For one, she's 20 years younger than me, so obviously she is in a lot better shape. The second thing is, even when I retired, her reaction time was better than mine. So it's pretty safe to say that she's way better than me now. I'm not afraid to admit that I've gotten old, as you all know, so I just do the best I can, but I don't even know if I could run any of these cars. The problem with her is that she is not really into this stuff. It's kind of an odd thing. She's got the skill set, but really, she only likes Porsche, Lamborghini, and Ferrari, hence the other cars. So if you could get her into one of these, I would be shocked. But Ara, next time we hang out, you can talk to her about that. Now, my friends, let's get into the 7. The 7 is killing me for a bunch of reasons. And I've been holding off and trying to get everything closed up on top because I want to finish the brake system. But it has just been non-stop issues. I think I'm on brake master cylinder, maybe number 5. I've even lost count. I've argued with so many companies, I can't even believe it, but it's so ridiculous. This is the latest master cylinder they sent me. Look at that. It's not even close. So I've just been banging my head against the wall, racking up shipping charges, going back and forth, arguing with several different companies, which I don't want to name on film, that are telling me that this is the right master cylinder for this car. It's gotten so bad that even in late night conversations past midnight with Abel, when he's telling me about the problems with his Grand National, even he mentioned to me, man, Ro, maybe this was a bad idea. We just can't seem to get the right parts. But he's working on it, I'm working on it. The problem is that I have to go to a road trip to LA next week, and I'm going to hopefully visit the rotary god. He's actually machining rotors right now. I need to know what the situation here is and with the engine. So even though I don't like doing double work, what I plan to do is just put the brake stuff aside, the clutch master cylinder and the slave, put the top back together, try and get it started. At least that way I know what I'm up against, and if I need more parts, I can at least tell him this week, so hopefully I can have them ready for me to pick up next week when we meet up. In any case, let's move to the 7 and see what happens. All right, it looks like everything on the top is put together to the best of my knowledge, and all we can do is hope that I didn't forget anything. Now, as we move forward, when we go to start the engine, or whether it be a rotary or piston engine, anything that's been sitting for any amount of time or anything you're going to tune, you definitely always want to check the CRIP. The CRIP stands for crank index position. A lot of you are already familiar with this, but for those of you that are newcomers, the rotary has an eccentric shaft. We've talked about that before, but still standard, everyone just calls it the CRIP. Whenever you're going to fire, the engine's been rebuilt, you're going somewhere to tune your car, it is standard practice to check the CRIP. If you go to have your car tuned on the dyno or anywhere on the street and they don't check the CRIP, you are either in the wrong place or with the wrong person. Many engines have been lost from the CRIP being off. My hope is, of course, that everything is locked down and we're good to go on this, but as usual, I always check it. The rotary is much more temperamental, let's say, than the piston engine like the X. You want to find a timing light that is as simple as possible. All those trick ones with all the computerized advance and everything, you definitely don't want one of those. You want a simple timing light that has an inductive pickup and power. You pull the trigger and it's going to strobe. Okay? So we have one of these hooked up now, and of course we'll be checking down there. We go back over to the Motec, and what we have to do is we want to shut the fuel pump off. Obviously you don't want any fuel or she may fire. Okay? And we will try and get in here. Okay, here we go. All right, we are now shutting the fuel pump off. Ah, man, come on. All right, there we go. We're into the crank index position. Now the crank index is 5. Okay, that's a setting, and I know that that's right. That does recall in my memory. But we test the advance at 0. That way we have the best chance of seeing what's going on, and we know we want it at top dead center. So now I will get into position with the light so we can watch down there, and we will start cranking. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's try that one more time. Go ahead and hit it again. Okay. All right, so since we set it at 0, it's supposed to be at the exact TDC mark, but we're not. So somehow, something is not exactly right. Let me go back to the computer and double check. The test advance for sure is set at 0. These are problems that you just don't want to have. And we need to go through the thought process. So there's a lot of things that are suspect. The first thing is, okay, so the wheel. We want to check the wheel to see if the wheel has possibly moved or is loose. And the wheel is tight. And I figured that would be the case because we pin the wheels because of problems with them moving before. So with the pickup wheel in position, the signal looks pretty clean, so you always want to think about possibly noise being an issue, but also because the engine's just cranking, RF usually isn't an issue. It usually gets exponentially worse with RPM and more components running, but it looks clean, like it wouldn't be a noise issue. If it was a sensor out, most likely, we wouldn't have any signal at all, or sometimes I've seen it be intermittent, which technically kind of looks like that. When cranking, it's harder to see. So if we think also about the wiring harness, it is true, the harness was disturbed. when I was in there underneath the manifold, but oftentimes when the harness is disturbed, either you're losing your signal or the signal's interrupted. The first thing to do is check with the scope. So I'm going to go get a scope and I'll be right back. Okay, now I have a scope. I use a Snap-on. This is an old version of the Vantage. We have several different types of scopes. If you want to do a lot of racing, you'll get very used to using these. Any of them work, but this one's just the easiest for me to use and I'm used to using it. So for those of you that don't know, almost all cars have a ref and a sync. So the ref is what gives you the position of the crankshaft. The sync tells the computer how many teeth before it hits top dead center. Okay, so usually they use either a magnetic pickup or a Hall effect. If things haven't changed, the way that you can tell a magnetic is it's 2-wire, and then as the wheel spins and it goes across the sensor, it creates continuity, which gives you your signal. Hall effect was a little bit different. It would run 12 volt ground and then it'd run a feed back to the ECU. They usually work better in situations where you have noise. They're more powerful. A lot of times we'd see a 5-volt signal, but things often change. Looking at the 7, it runs a magnetic pickup because it's got 2 wires, or at least that's what it looks like to me. So I've hooked up the scope first to the ref and we'll go ahead and spin it and see how it looks. Okay, go ahead and turn it. Okay, all right. The signal's clean. It's a square wave, up and down. Most of your engineers, I'm sure, so you probably all know about it. All right, so what we want to do is we want to double check the sync. So the scope usually tells a story. So if we know that the signal's coming off the sensor right, then that would pretty much eliminate the sensor. It doesn't eliminate the wiring. Wiring is still a suspect, but you know, you never know. Let's go ahead and change it over now. Okay, all right, go ahead. Okay, good. Okay, so we can see here that the signal is still clean on the sync. So I don't like to eliminate anything for sure at 100% until the problem's solved, but most likely the ref and sync are okay. Let's double check zero out again and crank it with the light. Still having problems getting into that in and out. Okay. All right, let's take our light. Go ahead and crank it. Good. Okay, the signal looks clean from what I can see. So there's a good chance we don't have a wiring problem. I've only seen something like this happen one time before, and it was in Huntington Beach when the car was having a wiring problem and a setup problem. But the problem is it's been a long time, so I don't remember what exactly happened. When the ref and sync fire, they create that square wave. The Motec reads off of either the rising edge or the falling edge. If I'm not mistaken, we had a setup problem where instead of reading off of the rising edge, it was reading off the falling edge. And that sure looks like possibly what could be going on here. But as far as I could recollect, that was a wiring problem with possibly, I don't know for sure. So at this point, we know that the wheel is good. The sensors seem to be okay. The harness is still suspect, but not as much of a chance of the harness. The best course of action at this point in time is to possibly potentially check more into the calibration. Given that we know it's been sitting such a long time and we're using a different computer, the best course of action, at least to start with, would be to, I hate to even say it, extrapolate all the numbers out of the current file, dump the file, and start a new file and rebuild. That way, at least we'd eliminate the file as potentially being corrupt. If that doesn't fix it, then of course, wiring, and the other thing that I need to do is ring out the wiring harness. Need to ring out the wires going from the sensors to the M4. If that's clean, then we can almost eliminate that for sure. Noise is minimal just because the signal does look clean. The best place to start checking is rebuilding the file, ringing out the wires. If that doesn't get it, then the next step may be to send the M4 back to Motec and have Simon look at it. So we'll start at this process and see, and then we can kind of go from there. Went back to the parts of the RX-7 cabinets, and luckily I was able to find a wheel. So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, I can explain it. If we look at it here, these teeth in here are the ref teeth. There are 12. The single is the sync. So as it passes the sensor, turning clockwise, the ref is telling the position of the crank, but the ECU has no idea where top dead center is. This is where the sync comes in. As it passes here, it tells the computer how many teeth till top dead center. But that tells you how it works, and then you can see, since it's a magnetic sensor, that's where the square wave comes in. As it comes across the sensor, the tooth hits this edge, pulls up, and then you have the falling edge. And that's where I've seen some issues before, so we'll kind of go in there and see what happens. So, on a happy note, two things. It's the weekend. The other thing is, we're still moving forward. Other than that, I'll see you next time.